I always love those countdowns. Every time I do this podcast, artist to artist, I'm always like, I'm so excited. This is my favorite people. But it feels that way every single time. I feel so grateful and excited to sit with just like the amazing artists of this time. And I really feel like that about the three of you. I just want to say hi, JJ88, hi, Richie Reseda, and hi, Contessa Gayles. Welcome to Artist, where I'm just honestly chatting with some of my favorite artists and asking questions about the work that they're doing, but also asking questions around how they see abolition inside of their art practice. And I got the privilege of seeing the private screening of Songs from the Hole, and I can't tell you how there's not words, and maybe you've already heard this from like the many people who've seen it now, but there are no words to describe how brilliant this piece is and what you all were able to accomplish. And I've never sat in a theater and cried an entire movie and didn't leave being like, I wish I didn't go see it because that was traumatizing, because that's like literally the opposite of what it was. It was like all these tears. It was deeply cathartic, it was deeply healing, and it was also like just brilliant art. Like all of that happened all at once. So I just want to say that off top, and I'm gonna actually start with you, 88. I want to ask you about why you chose to do this project, because it takes a lot to be that vulnerable in front of a camera and to share your story in that way, and it's a choice. And oftentimes, when people are, quote, subjects, and I'm sure you don't use that language in the way you talk about folks who are on the film, but in documentaries in particular, like subjects don't usually have as much input. It's very much like an outside gaze, and that's not what this film felt like at all. And so I'm wondering why the choice to make it and why the choice to put yourself in front of the camera in that way. That's one part of the question.
Okay. Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for having me. I would say like one of the reasons I chose to do this film and do this project with Richie and Contessa is because from everything that I've gone through, everything that I've put my community through, I feel like there has to be like fruit from it. I don't feel like even the hardest things in our lives are like to be cast aside and like, okay, that was a bad chapter I went through in my life. So I felt like it was necessary to share it with people, and in an effort to like, you know, invite people to process their own life and experience. And as an artist, it happens that I use music as a medium to process and to like share my life experience, and as well as like the medium of like filmmaking and just storytelling in that way. It's just a part of who I am as an artist, and like the spiritual calling in me to just share what is true.
I love that. Thank you so much. Rich, you met 88 while you were inside. And, you know, I've known you for a very long time, but I've been able to know many people in your life over the last decade that you spent a lot of time with. What was your inspiration? Like when you first met 88, like what was that moment where you're like, okay, yeah, bet, like we about to be in this together?
I was blessed to meet 88 after being in prison for like 4 years. And one of the most painful things for me, um, as an artist and as a person about being in prison is the way that I was kind of excluded from the culture, and excluded from having a voice. And I didn't have access to the internet. I've just always kind of understood myself through the culture, like, and not being able to really speak to it. You know, I grew up producing music, and for the couple of years before I got locked up, producing music videos. And I wasn't able to do that while I was in prison. I could write and I could rap for like a couple homies, but for me as an artist, that didn't feel like enough. It didn't feel like the whole thing. But the artistic community that I built inside, and my artistic community on the outside, which included you, Patrisse, were like really the people who were keeping me going. And I felt like culturally there was just something missing, like that Joel Santana album, like What the Game's Been Missing. Like, and I didn't have access to a lot of what was happening culturally. Like, I would get magazines and I'd watch Saturday Night Live, whoever would perform there, but that was like very like commercial level stuff. But I just felt like I yearned for a figure in culture, in the rap game, in like popular Black culture, to speak authentically to what I was experiencing every day as somebody who got incarcerated when I was 19. And when I met 88, he could sing, he could rap, he could play instruments. He just had a real youthful, beautiful energy, even though he had been down for so long. When we had met, I think I had been in for 4 years and 88 had been in for like 11. So when I just heard the art and what he was speaking to, um, I just knew it. I was like, this is the dude right here. This is the guy. Like, he's really, and he was just being himself. Um, but I knew like immediately upon meeting him, I felt like, um, 88 hates when people make comparisons, but to me, this isn't really a comparison. It's like, I feel like there's key moments in the culture where like there's like a paradigm shift. Like, I think Kanye was a paradigm shift. Like, we didn't really have rappers pre Kanye who were not hood nigga rappers. Even though Kanye from Chicago and Atlanta and everything, but y'all know what I mean. Like Kanye was wearing collared shirts and backpacks and like, which so many people in our communities are like that. But finally, we had a rapper who represented that. And then I feel like Drake also was a paradigm shift in that his music, he talked about his feelings and his bars were more about being relatable than being like clever. And he sang and he rapped. And I feel like Kendrick was a paradigm shift also in that he talked about hood shit, but not on some like bragging about it, but just like kind of, this is the world, this is Compton, this is the world that I live in as a kid with a basketball and some now and laters to eat, just walking through. And I felt like 88 was then the next like evolution of that, where we've heard a bunch of rappers talk about their homie who goes to prison for hella long. We hear people brag on their cousin who is really a gangbanger for real, for real, for real. And we've heard from the people who are in that life and are bragging on it, but we've never heard from the person who actually has that kind of street legend status that comes with enacting that kind of violence in your community and was offering an accountable story or even grappling with accountability. And could sing and rap both really well, which at the time people could kind of do one and then really do the other. He could do both really well. So I feel like he just brought something culturally, when he as just being himself, that I was really excited for, that made me really feel seen, and that I was honored to be able to produce music with him and then ultimately produce this film with him.
I love that so much. And I want to go back to this piece around like what it means to be pulled from the culture, after I check in with Contessa. Contessa, you did that. Like, I don't know. I just wanna like hug and squeeze you every time I think about what the F you did with this film, because I just finished the whole time. I just kept being like, damn, like they don't even know, as in like the outside Hollywood. I was like, they don't even know. Like, I just like felt it in my gut just how powerful your vision is as a director. And I want to know, like, tell us, when is the first time you realize like I'm a director? Like, that's what I want to do, because we don't have a lot of Black women directors being represented in this industry. And I'm very curious about how you, if you saw yourself, when you saw yourself, and like why directing, like why has that become your path?
It's a good question. Thank you so much for having us and for saying all of that. It means a lot, and I receive it. I'm practicing receiving it. I feel that honestly, my journey into directing started with these two guys right here, and which is why whenever so far in our, screening journey of this film, which, we had our premiere at South by Southwest, and we had our private screening that you attended before that. When they say things like, "Oh, Contessa like is a real director," and she said yes to working with us, I feel like I didn't consider myself a real director until we started working together, and they put their faith in me, and it just caused me to like really challenge myself creatively in ways that I never had before. A big part of that was the collaboration that in the way that we decided to make this together. But my background prior to this was in journalism and pretty squarely in journalistic leaning documentary filmmaking. And so this was definitely the most creatively outside of the box thing that I had ever attempted. And it was a 5-year process. So in the process of making it, I was also making other things, but a 5-year process from when I came on board. Their collaboration predates obviously when I came into the mix, but I think that once I met 88 and Richie, once I learned 88's story, heard the music, first saw it being performed live in the context of being in the gym at the prison that they were both incarcerated, filming the feminist on Cell Block Y for CNN. And then hearing what they had come up with in terms of, versions of the music that I could listen to and consider when we were first coming up with like how to make a film around this music. I was completely blown away by their artistry, and it challenged me to think about my artistry in different ways and level up really like in ways that I didn't even know I was capable of. I think that the process of the co-writing and then the process of taking the skills that I had learned over the years and things that I knew I was really good at as a storyteller, in the way that I had come up in documentary, and marrying that with, visual album and music video and narrative, and just kind of pulling on all of these different modes of expression to find the best way to tell this particular story. It was a unique process, and it wasn't like we endeavored to like just do something for the sake of like this would be artsy and cool. It just honestly and genuinely felt like this is the only way to tell this story truthfully, authentically, like holistically. We have to kind of create this form in order to tell it right and tell it fully.
I love that. I think the efficacy, and I don't obviously want to like share so much of the details of the film because people still need to watch it, and I know you have it's going around the film festival circuit, but the efficacy for me as like someone who's grown up in very similar neighborhoods as 88 and Rich, and have been, someone who's had many loved ones inside and has just experienced these so much harm and violence in our communities, was that it was a visual album and that there was all this music, and that, there'd be moments where I'm like crying and then I'm like, oh shit, but this knocks, like I'm bopping my head. It was like all of these senses being activated at once that I think such good art does. Like good art makes you feel everything at once simultaneously. And I just every time I think about it I smile, and I also want to cry. That's like, and it's the efficacy of this project, y'all. Like, yeah, I don't know how you integrate what you've done, and I don't know if you will, but like I feel like what you all have done is like also an intervention into this documentary framework and also just like visual album framework, because there's a framework for both and you've like merged them and it feels like you birthed something entirely new for producers and musicians and other directors to like look to. It feels like one of those projects. At the center for me of what you all worked on is this piece that you named, Richie, earlier about accountability and like what it means to have all these gifts as an artist, and also have caused harm and then like be accountable for it so publicly and also really beautifully. And I'm wondering, and this is a question for each of you, like how do you understand how art can be used, because you're doing it quite significantly, but how did you, as you were kind of developing this project, like how were you talking about the accountability piece inside of your art practice? Like I know that this is conversations, you know, Rich and Adie, I know this is stuff your conversations you're having all the time. Contessa, I haven't had those conversations with you, but I'm curious to hear about how you use art as a tool for accountability or art as the center and then accountability as, I don't know. How do you think about it? I'm very curious.
To be honest, in terms of process, like in creating art, I don't think about it. I just write what's true, or I try to write what's true. And in the post of like creating it and like sharing it with people, then I'm able to like say like, here's what it is I'm trying to say. Here's what I'm processing in this moment. And like um, having those conversations, which is like what we plan to do with our impact campaign with the film. It's like you can come in, experience the art, and experience me truth telling about my life, me being accountable. It just happens that I'm personally being accountable through these mediums, this kind of like blend of a documentary visual album. But I think going into it, it's like being truthful in my art is like important to me. Being authentic to my experience, being authentic to the results of my actions, and the results of like my way of being and how I've lived. I seek to like put that in the music and convey that through the music. And I guess in that way, I am able to be like accountable through my art. But I think during the process, I'm just seeking to be truthful and accountable to myself and using art to process it, using art to like flow through that accountability. But with regard to like the impact of the art and like how I be accountable about causing harm in community, that's what like I'm looking forward to like having more conversations after people see the film and hear the music to like discuss what it is that the themes that we are talking about, the things we are trying to heal from, and um, the things that we should be accountable about or would like to be accountable about.
I'll jump in on that too, because it reminds me of a part in the film that I really love, which is from 88's sister, Renisha. There's a moment in the film where she says, you know, he has a testimony. And I feel like so much of this film and the process of the art making around it was just like deeply spiritually informed, like 88 said before. And it makes me think of like art making as like confession, like personal confession in a lot of ways. I really love that language that she used in that moment. Like it's just a testimony in a lot of ways.
I'm a little more calculated in my approach.
Say it, Scorpio.
But I also think that that's my role. You know, like I was saying, like I met 88 and he was just being who he was. You know, like I believe that we were able to make a film that is in my from my viewpoint about accountability and offers tools for how other people can enact accountability, because we have a person at the center of the film who is committed to accountability as a person, and we have a team that is committed to accountability as a team, and we have friendships. Our friendships are committed to accountability, and we've worked it into the very nature of how we work as a film team, as well as Question Culture, which is one of the production companies on the project, in addition to Contessa's company, Coco Motion, we build accountability into everything we do, which is actually a deeply countercultural thing to do, and doesn't always feel good. Actually, it oftentimes feels hard, um, because we live in a deeply unaccountable culture. We live in a culture that says if you can afford it or get away with it, it's yours. It doesn't matter whose land this is, where it came from, who stewarded it. It doesn't matter what animal had to die for you to eat. It doesn't matter, if you could buy it and you can get away with it, it's yours. And that's not how we. That's. I'm not saying that's never how we move, because that's a culture we were raised in. But we have the intention, and we hold each other accountable to not moving like that, and to actually moving in accountability. And there's so many details of this film, in terms of how we paid people, how we hired people, how we made decisions, how we interacted with, all the people who could potentially be impacted by this film, people who have survived harm, people in the prison, people who, like, where we were looking at accountability at every turn. Like, accountability is as accountability does. We actually can't make art about accountability if we're not practicing it as human beings in our relationships, and in ourselves. And in that way, it feels like, that's where, for me, where art is a part of an accountability process. But to keep it 100, if we made donuts instead of films, donuts would be part of our accountability process. What we're seeking to do is live accountable lives, and art is how we spread it. But like, in a culture that's so performative, that's always about what are you putting out, and disconnecting that from what you're practicing.
Yeah.
Abolition is all about, like, how do I practice the thing first, and then let that, through osmosis, come out through the art naturally. Not like, it's not like 88's interviewing and then Contessa saying, stop, say that again more accountably. It's like she was documenting the process as it was coming out of his mouth. And he was practicing accountability in circle with us in prison.
That's powerful and important, I feel like, because um, what I hear you naming is there's also like a skill set that comes with, like, you have to build a skill set towards accountability because we don't live in an accountable culture. And I would also like just want to like tease this out a bit. You came out of a prison industry that is literally says it's about accountability, but it's not about accountability. And then you chose a project inside of this industry, Hollywood, that's also deeply unaccountable. How I want to hear like about the process a bit more, like, because I've heard you name it, Rich, and I think this audience in particular is going to reach different folks, especially inside of the film industry. When you sat down together and made the decision, we're going to do this, and then you were like, okay, and usually this infrastructure of filmmaking is deeply extractive. How did you decide against that? And then what were some like key things that you did? Like, I know you said you paid folks, but like, what were the conversations like internally? And I asked this question because it, to me, the filmmaking process is a model, not just the product that comes out, but the process itself becomes a model for other people who are in this industry. So anyone who wants to answer that, I'd love to just hear. You don't have to go so into it, but just like hear a bit about what you all did together.
I really appreciate that question. And you framed it earlier on in the conversation about how this is just a departure from the norms in the documentary industry in particular, with how films are made and how subjects are usually treated, or not a part of the process, the creative process. And while that's shifting slowly, it's not, I think that whenever we got the question in like grant applications, for example, for funding for the film, about, what is your accountability to the participants in the film, it was like a weird question to answer because of the way that it started out as a collaboration from the jump. It wasn't like, I'm going to make this film and let's decide from here how much 88 as the protagonist is going to have a say in the creative process. I think maybe because of the way it started, where I was invited into the project by 88 and Richie, as opposed to maybe it's more often the case that a filmmaker would like come to a group of people or an individual person and say, I want to make a story about your life. Maybe that set us off from jump to have a just completely different experience. But I also think because the creative like necessitated it, like this is 88's music, and the music that 88 and Richie made together in prison, I there was just no way to like have an extractive approach to like how do we now co-create a world around this music that you created. Oh, but you're not going to be a part of that? I don't know. Doesn't it just didn't make sense.
Contessa, I'm so grateful for your clarity because that's often not the case. Like, it's often the case where it's like, we hear this music, we heard about this person, and we're now going to take it, extract from it, and have our own creative around it. And so it's not always common sense. And I love how you're just making it like super plain. Like, no, this was the only way through and inside of this. So I just I'm just really grateful for like how your conviction around that. 88, do you want to talk about the process a bit? I'm assuming outside of the Feminist on Cell Block Y, this was like your first doc that you were in.
I think the only other thing I was like involved in that was filmed had to do with like another journalistic approach to like the work we were doing inside. However, I think the process that feels like different than the industry standard or norm is at the heart of like getting consent from the people whose story you're telling. What Contessa had was my consent to tell my story, and not only to tell my story, but to help me tell my story and tell my story with me. It's like going to community. I went to my community and asked if they would help me tell this part of my life. And so in that way, it's less around someone telling the story of someone else's life in a very serious environment, and telling a story that has to do with very heavy topics like community harm and how we heal from them. Like, instead of having someone else come in and tell that story, it is exactly what we were able to do, what my sister was alluding to and hinting to, which is like bear witness and give a testimony of something that is true. And we see, I mean, even in our form, we had to like adjust the form to even tell the story. So in that sense, we were like, this might be too artsy, but we were getting consent from the art in and of itself to like, how do we tell your story like art? Like, how do we tell the art story, you know? And in this whole process, and the role that art played in me finding healing and finding a means through which to tell my story, you know, it at the heart of it is really consent. It's really like a mutual understanding that you have ownership of your story. So how do you wish to tell it? And that's not something available to the average person, let alone to an incarcerated person. So it was very spiritual in that sense to like have a seat at the table of telling my own story.
Where the film leaves off is, for the most part, that 88 was in the hole and wrote all this music. And from those lyrics, you know, once he was transferred to another prison, met Richie, you know, showed him the music, and they co-created, you know, the production that would go with the music. So the music predates the film. And when we decided that we were all going to work together on this, there was all the original drafts of the treatments for the music, what we were calling music video treatments, were written by 88, and he hand wrote them and sent them all via snail mail to us to review and to look at and to give input and to figure out like, okay, how are we creating a narrative around these pieces? And over the course of the next 3 years, basically, we engaged in a process of writing and rewriting those pieces as we were filming on the documentary side, and as I was getting to know 88 and his family a lot more through the interviewing process, and um, just learning things that were a part of their story and their experiences, and then incorporating those elements back into the narrative treatments for the music videos to make sure that the two worlds reflected each other, and that whatever you were learning on the nonfiction side of the film was being deepened and emotionally expressed or hinted at or represented metaphorically or in some kind of way on the visual album side of the film. But that was like a process of co-writing through the mail and through phone calls over the course of 3 years, basically.
Wow.
Just to give like a real concrete example of like the collaborative process. And I also want to acknowledge, like, it's not as if the dynamic between 88 being incarcerated and me and Richie being free, like, didn't, like, that represents a power dynamic. And I just want to acknowledge, like, this wasn't a relationship that was devoid of that. Like, there was
Yeah.
only so much we could do while we were filming on the outside to, like, be able to show 88 what we were doing. And that was, like, sending photos from set, behind the scenes, photos from set,
Wow.
stills from set, and yeah, just like trying to keep that feedback loop constantly, refreshed and alive throughout the whole process. But it was, it came with the difficulties and the barriers of one of our collaborators being incarcerated.
I was just gonna say that just seeing the first iterations of the treatments that I wrote in stills was a wild experience. It's like you don't get to see the motion and the beauty in the motion that Contessa captures, but you still see the beauty in like the world that we co-created, you know. And so experiencing it still first was really cool. Being inside and getting those letters, it really like helped me like stay in the process of creating and looking toward the horizon of what.
Richie caught that question, right?
If I did, I got too lost in the poems of Contessa and 88's answers to remember quite what the question was.
Understood. I wanted to know a bit more about the process, the behind the scenes process that you spoke to, and this team has so beautifully spoke to. That lended itself towards being accountable even in the process, not just in the product. And Contessa shared very specifically the treatments that 88 did and sent to y'all. I'm just wondering if there's other things that you want to share about what happened behind the scenes that feels qualitatively different than what industry usually does.
It took a lot of relational work to make this film happen. Every actor who plays an incarcerated person, except for just a couple, were actually people who were incarcerated. Like, how are we also making sure that we're not bringing people on set to like try to embody what they think incarceration feels like when we have access to so many formerly incarcerated people as being incarcerated people? In the scenes where you see the extras who are like visitors in the visiting room, those are real people who've been in visiting rooms. Those are our friends and family who, grew up visiting people and have incarcerated people in their lives right now. Um, these were like some of the things that we did in addition to like what 88 said. Like every day after set, after being on location all day, I would then go to Walgreens, print out the pictures, print out the stills, and send them to 88. Like it was a part of our process. It wasn't like an extra thing. It wasn't a favor. There was a line item in the budget to send those pictures, and to make sure we're paying people as much as we can afford to pay them rather than as little as we can afford to pay them when it came to these directly impacted extras and you know, we could have had the homies in there on strength, on like, hey, we were locked up together, we're making a movie, do you want to be in it? And they would say, yeah, but we did it, and we had to follow all the freaking California guidelines of putting them on a whole ass payroll and making them W-2s. And I won't bore y'all with that. And for all the film producers who are listening, I won't trigger y'all with that. But the it was, you know, we really did everything we could to make this as impactful as possible, up to the impact campaign now, where we're going into prisons and jails and organizations and paying those folks as well. Not just we're going to drop in, show our movie, take pictures with y'all, and use your incarceratedness to uplift our platform and look like we care about people. And now you're just a random incarcerated face in an Instagram post, and we move on and we don't even know who you are. But like using those opportunities to tell those people's stories and to tell the stories of all the brilliant art and artists that is behind the walls. We always say, like, we are an example of the creativity behind the walls. We're not, you know, exceptions to the rule. So just yeah, every turn really looking at like, who made this possible, who made us being here possible, in the ways that they, you know, taught us how to program in prison, or like, how do we use this as to pay back into that.
I love that so much. At the height of the US prison population, it was about 2.3 million people in prison, 1 million were Black. And I remember when I learned that number, how staggering that was, but also how true, because I was looking around my neighborhood and I was like, oh yeah, that person's incarcerated, that person's incarcerated, that person's incarcerated. Incarceration itself, the act of kidnapping community members and putting them far away from us, and is an act of deep violence on the individual. It's an act of deep violence on the entire community. And Richie, you have said it a couple times in this interview where you're talking about the artists who are inside that often don't get recognized. But I would also say that, like, don't get taken seriously enough to even build an industry for them outside of incarceration. And so I've lived like the last 25 years supporting formerly incarcerated people in my own family and community, and largely the support that's offered coming home is like, be a construction worker, work at a bakery, amazing jobs for sure. But I've not, until QC has come around, and I'd love for you to talk more about question culture and the work that y'all are doing, where you've been like, I actually want a pipeline for artists who are inside, who are coming home, or artists who are inside to be seen and recognized, and for the brilliance that they bring. And I think that is like an intervention that's being made. And I'd love to hear if there are other orgs and groups who are also doing that. I know the artist and at the art, the Center for Art and Advocacy is doing something like that. I don't know if it's so intentional about being a pipeline, but I've heard you name it as like a pipeline from the inside out, or just like really supporting incarcerated artists. Why QC? What is QC? Tell us more about that.
There are so many dope people in prison. There are so many brilliant people in prison. Hundreds of thousands, literally millions of people. Like I said, what was most painful for me in prison was to have my voice taken away from me as an artist. And for years, I just remember thinking, I'm gonna do everything in my power to make it so that this doesn't happen to people no more. And that we can still have voices even while we're, you know, locked up, and to get rid of locking people up altogether. And for a long time, raising money, you know, working on this film with Contessa, on the outside, obviously with 88 on the inside, it was like I would just have to be in these Hollywood ass spaces, almost in a way like try my best to speak for 88, or to speak for all the brilliant incarcerated people that we work with, because that is a core competency of Question Cultures, making ways to work with incarcerated artists, from the designers we work with, and you know, all the guests we had on our podcast, and man, and they just would it was so difficult for folks to see us beyond like a sob story or like a tokening moment. And it's like outside of this dude being locked up, he's actually doper than your favorite rapper. I promise you. What I'm most honored that one, that 88 is now home and can speak for himself, and that people can see this. Like I'm so grateful that we met Contessa, and Contessa got to see it, and Contessa got to hear it and really choose to be a part of it on your own accord, Contessa. Like it's not like I was trying to pitch you like I might pitch a director today who's never seen it. Like you knew 88, you've heard 88, you knew the music. Like I didn't have to convince Contessa that 88 was dope because she actually went there and saw it and heard it. And this has been a practice. Question Culture is a practice. Songs from the Whole is a practice in bringing that out here so that everybody can see it and hear it, and that our shit is just as good as this big budget Hollywood shit. So I don't know if that's exactly an answer to your question, but that is, you know, I can get into the technical, how we build a pipeline and what that, you know, what that looks like. But like spiritually, that's what I feel called to share, which is like for people who have never been there or who didn't grow up in visiting rooms like you did, Patrisse, and supporting family coming home, and they have such a limited view of who is in prison. And my deepest hope with this film, in addition to spreading, you know, the culture of accountability piece and help building a world where this type of violence, including the violence of incarceration, doesn't happen, my deepest hope is that we just have a more complicated view of who incarcerated people are, and therefore what is possible, because there are a million more 88s and a million more Richies, and there are Contessas that are back there, you know, that are back behind the walls right now in the whole solitary confinement, that are just as dope. We could do a whole separate episode and just bring them. Like you could do a whole podcast and we wouldn't run out of people to bring on, of people who are really dope, who are really bringing something interesting and necessary and life-saving to the culture. And the only thing stopping them is the violence of incarceration.
Okay, I have like questions about art for y'all. You ready? Okay, 88, you're first. Who are your top 3 rappers right now? Let's go. Bring it.
Why you do me
You're on
like?
mute.
Why you do me like that? Why you do me like that right now? With all that's going on with these rappers right now, you gonna ask me who my top 3 is?
I'd also love your thoughts. You know, J. Cole just apologized to Kendrick and people are mad at him for it. I was like, wow, team.
Right.
But you know.
I mean, we could have a whole conversation on that alone. And what that speaks to about the culture. Like, here's a person who got into the dominance culture against his own conscience and decided, you know what, I'm gonna back out. I actually don't want to try to dominate somebody that I admire. I actually don't want to talk bad about him. And then the culture responds to him and says, you're weak. It's kind of like an indication of like where we are culturally. But I guess Cole is one of my favorite rappers, just to be honest. If we talking strictly rappers, because of moments like that, because I know he'll be honest enough to expose a misstep, not only in front of an arena full of people, but the world for real. I love, it's not one artist, but it's a group of artists. I love the Concrete Boys, Lil Yachty, DC2 Drill, Camo, Caribou. They are going nuts right now with their aesthetic and their style of rapping and the beats they choose. I think they're doing something really cool right now. And then Question Culture, like, I think we really have done something cool. I don't mean to like put myself on the list in no way, but
no, you can.
But I definitely am a fan of the fact that the 3 of us have shifted a form. We've created a new way to present both film and music together. And film and music have always been together since they started putting sound in films. But I think never in this way. Like, we hard.
um, and 88, I love that you ended with that, just because I got to sit in the car with you while you told me all of your film ideas and TV ideas, and I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And it now makes so much sense based off of Contessa, you saying, like, he sent us all those treatments in writing. Like, I didn't know that part of you until, like, maybe 6 months ago.
Yeah.
You got a big brain, fam. You got a big artist brain. It's amazing to witness. Contessa, who are your fave directors right now? Like, who are you looking to around how they're, like, bending the form? I loved hearing that, like, directing wasn't what you were thinking about before you met the two of them, but you are a brilliant director. So I hope that is just like full steam part of your path, because we need to see your vision more. Like, yeah, I really wish that for you, and I hope that for you.
Thank you. Let me clarify. I was thinking about it. I just had imposter syndrome that I could really do it until other
There
people
you
came to me
go.
and were like, "Will you do it?"
There you
um,
go.
Now you put me on the spot, and you're gonna see I'm not like a true cinephile either.
You can also give old school, like, it doesn't have to be like most recent. I'm just curious.
You might have to come back to me. I gotta think about this. Put Richie
No
on the
problem.
spot first.
Rich, I'm putting you on the spot. Top 3 producers right now.
My top three producers right now are Dylan Wiggins, Tyreek Bright, and Garfield Bright the third, because those are the people we produced this album with, and who just took what we did in prison initially, because we used the vocals from prison and then reproduced the music, the beats around them, kind of following the same form as the original beats, and got with live musicians, and then got with Dylan, and then worked with the twins, Tyreek and G from Twin Towers. And they just took, what we had in prison and elevated it to what beyond anything that I had ever been a part of musically, beyond what I could even envision, what definitely beyond what I could have produced on my own. Um, and to hear this music now, it's so layered, it's so dramatic and cinematic. We worked with All for One brass band in New Orleans to do the horns.
Ooh.
Yeah, Cesar Hernandez, Gianluca Gibbons on the trumpet and saxophone, and we worked with Jace on the keys, and G played viola on it, and like we worked with Anissa Strings, who plays upright bass, who did all the bass on the score, because we scored the record too, with the twins, with Tyreek and G. Like, it was working with them. I learned so much from them. It like elevated my craft as a producer. Period. But every time I listen to this music, it makes me take myself more seriously as a producer. I feel like, similar to what you were saying, Contessa, it was like, damn, like, okay, like, I'm on this level now. Like, I've been wanting to do this, but I'm here. Like, and those are my favorite producers. And if you listen to their music outside of what they do with us, like, if you listen to what Dylan does with Rosalia, what Dylan does with Mustafa, I met Dylan through Mustafa, of course, and all the artists who work with Dylan, Frank Ocean, like, and if you listen to the folks who the twins work with, what the twins are doing with their own stuff, Twin Deli, they just released a record. It's just like really good music. People who don't skip the step of being good at your craft, which is so easy to do in the like clout era that we're in now, which is like, if you can get a lot of views on something, you're fill in the blank now. Like, people are like, I want to be a chef. Like, if I can get 1 million views making food, I'm a freaking chef. Like, we're working with producers who spend hours and hours getting really good at their craft, and that inspires me, and it shows it in the music that we made together.
I love it. And I'm coming back to you, Contessa, with a revised question. I want to know what your favorite film is.
I'm gonna give you a silly one. Moonstruck with Cher and Nicolas Cage.
Oh my God, I love that movie. Wait, why do you love that movie?
It's just so ridiculous and joyful. I love that movie. I don't know. Like, Cher is perfect. Nicolas Cage is perfect. The script is crazy. The plot is insane. Like, it's a great movie.
Have y'all seen that 88 and Richie?
Yes, I have. I saw it when I was
I knew you
incarcerated.
had.
It's such a good
We gotta
movie.
do
I
a
haven't
movie
seen it
night.
in a long time. I should revisit that.
Same. I'm literally gonna go revisit that. I just like have an image of Cher and young Nicolas Cage, and I'm just cracking up on that side. Thank you for that.
How old is this movie? Cher was young. Cher and
About as old as
Cher and Nicolas Cage
it
were
is
young
from the
at the same
90s.
time. I feel like Cher was
Oh
young
my
before my mama was
God.
born. She looked young. She looks amazing. It's no shade. I'm just wondering when this movie came out. I thought you meant a new movie.
No.
1987.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Cher was
Oh, I
like
see. I was saying.
65
Before
in
your time.
1987.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm so grateful for y'all. Thank you so much for joining Artist to Artist. Like, can you just tell us where the film is going next and what our audience, like where our audience can view it next, what film festivals it's going to?
Next, we're going to be at the
I'm just making.
Milwaukee Film Festival and the Seattle Black Film Festival at the end of April. To follow us on the festival circuit and also our impact and engagement campaign plans, our Instagram handle is at Songs from the Whole. Our website is songsfromthewhole.com, and we'll be updating on those platforms as we make our way around the country, have our international premiere, and bring this film to more audiences.
Do you know where your international premiere is yet?
No.
Okay,
TBD.
can't wait. Yes. And for folks who like want to see the film, are you waiting till after the circuit to like start doing like till you do the social impact campaign?
No. Yeah, Richie,
If
do you
folks
want to
want
talk
to see
about
the
that?
film or like bring it to their schools or how can they do that?
Well, we're not going into schools and stuff as much right now. We've been really focusing on prisons, jails, communities
Okay.
impacted by state violence and gun violence. So those people who are in those doing work in those spaces can also reach out to us through the Instagram or the website, and we'd love to bring it to them. We can't show it publicly till it's sold. So if you happen to be a film buyer with 10, 20, 30 million dollars laying around that you want to change the culture with, y'all can hit us up, and then everybody can see the film. It's really the ball's in your court.
That part. Do you have like a dream place, or do you not want to jinx it, or do you not want to like say the dream place and then another place reaches out? You want to just keep it open?
No dreams.
Just show it.
We have lots of dreams, but no specific dreams.
I have a dream. No Martin Luther King. My dream is that for films like Song from the Whole can one day be on platforms that are owned by us, and that we will have access to bringing things to mass audiences with companies that move the way that we do, and with worker-owned cooperatives and folks being able to own their own process. Like that's the long-term dream that we're that at QC we're building towards, is to have platforms that are worker owned for us to put our stuff out into the world. And today, as long as you got 20, 30, 40, $300 million, then you can be a part of that.
I love y'all so much. I'm really grateful for the three of you, what this beautiful film that you brought into the world and the process that you did it in. It's I'm quite inspired by you three. So thank you for joining Artist to Artist.
Thank you for having us, Patrisse.
Thank you for having us.